All right, good afternoon. Tomorrow is no surprise the start of the General Assembly. We will have Brendan Varma speaking on behalf of the PGA brief you as soon as I'm done. The Secretary General does expect to have a busy week. We so far have more than 130 bilateral meetings scheduled through next Monday, and he will have about 34 major speaking events this week, and we're sharing those remarks as we go. We're also trying to get you an embargoed copy of his speech for tomorrow to have it ahead of time. And obviously tomorrow he will kick off the new session with a speech laying out his priorities for the General Assembly session. And you can watch all that live. This morning, the Secretary General spoke at a high-level meeting on reform organized by the United States. He said that to serve the people we support, the people who support us, we must be nimble, effective, flexible, and efficient. The Secretary General highlighted the reform efforts that are currently underway, citing the strategy to end sexual exploitation and abuse, as well as plans to achieve greater gender parity in the UN, protect whistleblowers, and strengthen counterterrorism structure. The Secretary General also said that reforming our peace and security architecture is to ensure that we are stronger in prevention, more agile in mediation, and more effective and cost-effective in peacekeeping operations, as well as the development system to become much more field-focused, well-coordinated, and accountable. To underpin all of these efforts, we are pursuing sweeping management reform to simplify procedures, decentralize decisions, and with greater transparency, efficiency, and accountability. The Secretary General stressed that the true test of reform will not be measured in words in New York or world capitals. It will be measured through tangible results in the lives of the people we serve and the trust of who support our work through their hard-earned resources. Value for money while advancing shared values. This is our common goal, he added. And he also spoke at a high-level meeting on financing for development and the Sustainable Development Goals. He said that the world has the resources to deliver on the 2030 agenda, and that the international community must ensure that these resources are delivered where they are needed most. The Secretary General stressed that while globalization has brought extraordinary benefits, it remains fundamentally unequal, and these unequal gains are reflected in people's fears, anxieties, and outright anger. Financing for development must help developing countries attract innovative finance and gain greater access to financial markets and private investment, he added. The Secretary General also announced the Finance Summit, which will be held in New York in September of 2018. And he just spoke at a high-level stakeholders event on dialogue and climate change, which brings together a number of stakeholders on climate change, and especially leaders at the governmental and the regional and sub-regional levels. He said that when countries adopted the Paris Agreement, they rose to a global challenge, but now we have an even bigger one, raising ambition and staying the course. He called on all actors to step up climate action before it's too late, and highlighted an example of solutions already making a difference around the world. He added the UN is ready to assist countries in tackle climate change, and reiterated his commitment to host a climate summit 2019 in September for this purpose. And he will be addressing shortly a event on support for the millions of people across the Caribbean impacted by Hurricane Irma. He will welcome the regional response plan that has been developed with the support of national and regional disaster management agencies. And on that note, the Emergency Relief Coordinator, Mark Lawcock, yesterday allocated $10 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund to help tens of thousands of people impacted by the disaster. In addition, our colleague at the World Food Program have launched a $5.7 million emergency operation in Cuba to provide food assistance for 4 months to 660,000 people. The announcement came during a 2-day visit by the executive director of WFP, David Beasley, to the impacted communities on the island. And finally, the UN Migration Agency, IOM, has appealed for almost $5 million to help rebuild communities impacted by Irma, as well as Hurricane Jose in the Caribbean, Cuba, and the U.S. And turning to Myanmar and Bangladesh, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that despite continued advocacy efforts for unhindered humanitarian access, the UN and its partners are not being granted access by the government in Myanmar's Rakhine state, where there still are security operations ongoing. As a result, the UN cannot independently verify reports of continued violations of human rights of people fleeing the area, as well as the number of people who have been uprooted or on the move. It's estimated that 415,000 people have now crossed into Bangladesh from Rakhine State. More than 170,000 people are reportedly not able to access primary health care services. Nearly 300,000 people, including 154,000 children, under the age of 5, and nearly 55,000 pregnant women require additional food assistance. Funding is urgently needed to support and scale up existing services, as well as to set up new services across different sites. And at the start of the school year, the World Food Programme is warning that more than 1.5 million vulnerable children across West and Central Africa risk going to school hungry or dropping out altogether due to lack of financing for its school meals program. Altogether, WFP's regional program faces a $76 million funding gap. The repercussions are dramatic since WFP provided lunches and snacks are the only meal some of these youngsters get. That's the case in the conflict-torn Central African Republic, where the school meals program aimed to reach 200,000 youngsters is only half funded, yet the more critical cases of Burkina Faso's program, reaching 83,000 people, is 0% funded. Other particularly at-risk countries include Liberia, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, and Senegal. Studies show the meals help improve attendance and performance rates. They're also a key incentive for parents to send their children, particularly girls, to school. And from Syria, we are calling on all parties to the conflict to ensure the protection of civilians from the effects of violence in eastern Deir ez-Zor following increased reports of civilian deaths and injuries due to airstrikes in recent days. We call on the parties to do their utmost to ensure the safety and well-being of civilians in the conduct of military operations and strictly follow international humanitarian law principle of distinction, proportionality, and precautions in and from the effects of attack. On September 14th alone, dozens of civilians were reportedly killed following a number of airborne strikes in several locations in the eastern part of Deir ez-Zor Governorate. And you will see that yesterday we issued a statement on the recent vote in the parliament of the Kurdistan region of Iraq. In it, the Secretary General said he believes that any unilateral decision to hold a referendum at this time would detract from the need to defeat Daesh, as well as much-needed reconstruction of the regained territory and the facilitation of a safe, voluntary, and dignified return of more than 3 million refugees and internally displaced people. The Secretary General respects the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and unity of Iraq and considers that all outstanding issues between the federal government and the Kurdistan regional government should be resolved through structured dialogue and constructive compromise. The Secretary General calls upon the leaders across Iraq to approach this matter with patience and restraint. The UN stands ready to help those efforts. And Nikolai Mladenov, the Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, welcomed the recent statement by Hamas announcing the dissolving of the Administrative Committee in Gaza and its agreement to allow the government of national consensus to assume its responsibility in Gaza. In a statement yesterday, Mr. Mladenov commended the Egyptian authorities for their tireless efforts in creating this positive momentum. All parties must seize opportunity to restore unity and open a new page for the Palestinian people. The UN stands ready to assist all efforts in this respect. It's critical that the grave humanitarian situation in Gaza, most notably the crippling electricity crisis, be addressed as a priority. And last night here in New York, our colleagues from the UN Development Program honored the 15 winners of their Equator Prize, which recognizes the work of communities that are helping to protect the environment and tackle climate change. This year's winners come from 12 countries and addressed issues like biodiversity, conservation, climate change adaptation, and many others. Full winners on UNDP's website. And just to note that the International Atomic Energy Agency's 61st General Conference today approved by acclamation the reappointment of the Director General, Yukiya Amano, to a further 4-year term in office, which will start on December 1st, 2017. And a senior appointment to flag, the Secretary General has appointed Bintou Keita of Guinea as Assistant Secretary General for Peacekeeping Operations. Ms. Keita will succeed El Qassim Wane of Mauritania, to whom the Secretary General reiterates his deep gratitude and appreciation for his dedicated service to the organization. Ms. Keita joined the UN in 1989. Since 2015, she's been serving as Deputy Joint Special Representative of the African Union UN Hybrid Mission in Darfur. Her bio is in my office. And today, before the start of the General Assembly, we extend our thanks to Côte d'Ivoire and El Salvador, who have paid their regular budget dues in full, bringing it up to the magical number of 129. And a couple of press encounters to flag. 2:30 p.m., the GA Stakeout, third floor, press encounter by Cecilia Malmström, European Commissioner for Trade, on the launch of the Alliance for Torture-Free Trade. 6 p.m. back in this briefing room, there'll be a briefing by Norio Maruyama, the spokesperson for the Japanese Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe. And at 8 p.m. at the GA Stakeout, there'll be a press encounter by the Foreign Minister of Norway, His Excellency Mr. Brende. And just to remind you that tomorrow and Wednesday, we do not expect to have a noon briefing. We'll post the highlights online. And obviously, we will share the schedule for press encounters, and also a reminder that this afternoon there will be the special high-level event on preventing sexual abuse and exploitation, hosted by the Secretary General. We'll be putting out a press release after that. Halas. Madame.
Stéphane, regarding the high-level meeting today about the reform, UN reform, it was striking that the meeting was very short, and the Secretary General spoke second, actually, and not first, what is usual, if I'm not mistaken. And why there were no other high representative who spoke at the meeting?
Sure. First of all, with the meeting was not hosted by the Secretary General. It was hosted and led by the United States, co-hosted by a number of other nations. So since it's not the Secretary General's meeting, I think there's nothing to be read into the fact that the Secretary General spoke after the host of the meeting. I would add that the Secretary General was very happy to participate in this meeting and was very receptive to the words delivered by the President of the United States. As to why other countries did not speak, again, that's the question for the hosts, and that's the way it was organized. The Secretary General was a guest, an honored guest, we would hope. And voila. Mr. Lee.
I'll ask you two things about one about Myanmar and also about Yemen. In Myanmar, I wanted to know. Over the weekend, I heard from some people that work in the Department of Political Affairs, and I wanted to get you to respond to this. The idea being that the Secretary General has been urged for some time, in fact months, to be more vocal or be more active on the issue of the plight of the Rohingya, and that at least at an earlier stage, his analysis was that this might put Aung San Suu Kyi in a difficult situation with the military. Is that an accurate depiction? And if so, what obviously has the plight changed so much, or does he think he might have gotten involved earlier?
I would say it's an accurate description. I think anyone who would have read or seen the Secretary General's statements on the situation in Myanmar over the last 2 weeks could only say that he's being vocal and being extremely vocal on the situation. There is a time for diplomatic engagement. There's a time for speaking out more loudly. There's a time for speaking out loudly and remaining engaged diplomatically. The Secretary General has a number of tools in his kit, and he uses them as he sees fit.
And has he spoken to Aung San Suu Kyi since?
Not since about 10 days ago. We're obviously very much looking forward to hearing what she will have to say in the speech she's scheduled to deliver. I think it's about Tuesday in Myanmar, and I think late tonight here in New York.
Sure. And on Yemen, I wanted to ask, I'd also heard that on the issue of the envoy, Ismail Old Sheikh Ahmed, that his contract was expiring September 20th, and that the decision was made to extend it until February. There's one I just want to know factually if it's true, and if he has been extended, did the Secretary General consider the fact that it seems to be difficult for him to communicate with those in power in de facto authorities in Sana'a?
I'm not aware of the contractual basis of our envoy. What I do know is Mr. Ismail Old Sheikh Ahmed is our envoy, continues to be our envoy for the foreseeable future, and the Secretary General fully backs him and his efforts. Mr. Klein.
Yes, regarding the Kurds.
Regarding
the Kurds.
Yes, sir.
Is the Secretary General essentially saying that the desire for self-determination on the part of the Kurds should take second place to this notion of the territorial integrity and unity of Iraq? Or is he just saying that's something that should be postponed, the referendum postponed? I mean,
the issue of self-determination is enshrined in the Charter. Secretary General, as the leader of this organization, obviously respects the Charter. I think the statement is fairly clear. For the Secretary General, Iraq is at a very difficult and critical time. He understands the issues on both sides, and he feels that they are best resolved at this very time through a constructive and positive dialogue between the authorities in Erbil and the central government in Baghdad.
But if the Iraqi authorities refuse to consider the idea of a referendum that includes self-determination as one option, then what? I mean, I guess where do we go from there? I mean, are the Kurds then supposed to just wait forever to realize their own aspirations for self-determination, or is it just a matter of postponing this until Daesh is defeated? I guess
I think where we can only go from where we are. I'm not going to speculate to where we may be. For the Secretary General, he feels that at this point in time, these issues need to be raised and dealt with in a constructive dialogue by both the central authorities in Baghdad and the authorities in Kurdistan. Mr. Arakat, welcome to this briefing.
Thank you for taking my question. I wanted to ask you very quickly on Syria. You mentioned the area bombardment in eastern Syria. Do you know who did that? Is it the international coalition led by the United States, or is it the Syrian Air Force?
We have no way of independently and verifying at this point who does the bombardment. The focus right now is on the suffering of the people themselves who are on the receiving end of these bombardments, regardless of who manufactures the armaments or who drops it. Evelyn.
May I just follow up very quickly on something that you did not mention, which is the JCPOA. You know, the Americans keep saying that Iran is complying with the text or with the technical aspect, but not with the spirit. Do you see it that way? Is that how the United Nations sees it? And what is the spirit?
For the JCPOA, the IAEA has done its reporting, and they're in the lead, and it's not for the Secretary General to second-guess that reporting. There is a mechanism through which he also reports to the Security Council, and he has done so and will continue to do so. From our point of view, we regard the agreement as a key diplomatic achievement in recent years for this region, and we feel that everything should be done to support it and to keep this agreement. Evelyn.
Could you go over the numbers for Myanmar again? 450 have crossed, or 415?
415. We'll give you all the. We'll just so there's no confusion. We'll give out the numbers.
And the 170 no access to health care, is that in Bangladesh?
Yeah, this is in Bangladesh. Our point is that we do not have the access we need in Rakhine State. The numbers we're giving is for what is going on in Bangladesh. Yes, sir. And then go ahead. Then we'll move.
Thank you.
We'll move to the right after we've done with the left.
It's been a practice that the United Nations issues a statement on the anniversaries of massacres, like Srebrenica, for example. Those days, the 35th anniversary of the Sabra and Shatila massacres, and why there is no statement on this occasion. Thank you.
I think a lack of a statement does not lessen our memory for those who perished. Yes, ma'am. Sure. If you need to press your microphone, Alexandra.
Alexandra from AP. I wanted to know if there was any development in the UN looking into the Code Blue allegations about the sexual abuse cases and what they called failure of the UN to properly investigate those cases, especially the failure to interview some of the victims. I was wondering if you could describe what the UN is doing to look into those allegations and if anything has been done in the last few days, especially since they've come up right ahead of this meeting this afternoon about the same subject. Thanks.
Sure. What I can tell you, and bear with me because the information I got was a little is a bit wordy, but it is very important. We've seen the information provided by AIDS Free World, which alleges a series of lapses in the investigations. As repeatedly stressed by the Secretary General, we will not tolerate anyone committing or condoning sexual exploitation and abuse. We obviously take these matters extremely seriously and are committed to transparency in all cases. A preliminary inquiry by the UN mission Central African Republic has indicated that all 14 allegations refer to the incidents that took place in 2015 and 16. 13 of these originated from military police components of the peacekeeping mission and related to fact-finding activities following receipt of information regarding possible instances of sexual exploitation abuse by mission military personnel, while the last one was brought to the attention of us through AIDS Free World report itself. MINUSCA was able to establish that 7 of the 14 cases disclosed in the report are already recorded in the misconduct tracking system maintained by the Department of Field Service and were in fact acted upon. 2 of these are not listed in the public website as information on possible sexual exploitation abuse was deemed insufficient to warrant further investigation. Our colleagues at the UN mission have requested a full-fledged investigation to be conducted into 6 of these allegations, as well as into the ones brought to its attention by Code Blue. A formal referral to the concerned member states is in process to ensure that offenders are held accountable by their respective countries of origin, while strengthening support measures for victims. MINUSCA has also taken immediate measures to ensure that all heads of mission component are reminded of the UN's procedures on reporting misconducts and investigations directly to the head of mission. The mission's conduct and discipline team works closely with and regularly reminds the national investigation officers from troop and police contributing countries of their responsibilities to strictly follow the highest investigation standards in order to minimize further trauma on victims. A full investigation into the matter is being prepared by the mission with the support of OIOS, and the results will be made available to you. I will give that to you in writing as well, because that was a lot of words. Yeah. Go ahead.
Has it been determined whether the victims were in fact not interviewed? And
I think my understanding is that they're looking into these cases. Some of them were in fact were in our tracking system. 2 of them are this deemed to be insufficient information. My understanding is that the mission is then looking back at other cases raised by Code Blue, and we'll update you as we can.
Look back at these 2 cases that were.
They will look back into these cases.
So, like for example, for these 2 that were deemed insufficient, were the victims interviewed?
That I don't have that information. I will try to see if I can find it. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Elizabeth Joseph with CNN. Does the Secretary General have meetings scheduled with the visiting North Korean delegation?
He's expected to meet the foreign minister of the DPRK at this point. Stéphane.
Thank you. I have a question, but before I follow up to the first question about the meeting, the conference today, was that Secretary General surprised how short it was? I mean, President Trump spoke a little bit more than 4 minutes. I mean, was any surprise?
Our understanding, again, this was not our meeting, right? We were invited to speak. Secretary General was invited to speak. He, of course, was delighted to be involved in this meeting. I think a large number of member states signed on to the declaration. As to the length of the meeting, I think those are questions for the organizers.
But like
I mean, I spoke to the Secretary General afterwards. I caught up with him. He was all smiles and he was very happy.
Okay. So my question is, instead, there was just an hour ago a stakeout of the Italian Foreign Minister Alfano here. And I had a question, like other journalists, on the Libya situation about the migrants issue, the human rights aspect. And my question was how the timing, because the foreign minister, the Italian foreign minister, has been repeating, UN will have to intervene more in Libya as far as to do with the humanitarian affair. We expect the UN will, the mission of UN will get bigger on that side. So my question was on him on the timing and say, okay, you've been talking about that, but when this is going to happen? Because at the moment, the people are dying there because they are not, they stop, they're not able anymore to cross. And he say, well, Italy is not the UN.
Stéphane, what's the question?
The question is, Italy is not the UN, and practically it just keeps saying, we hope that this happens soon. So who is really, who is in charge at this point to make sure that this UN mission in Libya will be able to take care more about the migrants there? They are in condition that the humanitarian conditions are very, very bad. I know that.
Well, obviously, we're all very aware of the political situation in Libya. I think the Secretary General is rather bullish on on his thoughts on finding a positive outcome. The focus is on political stability returning to Libya, obviously creating the environment in which the UN mission can return and operate fully, with a full country team that can help support the Libyan government, the Libyan authorities, in providing the humanitarian help to all those people who are trying to make the crossing, who are stuck in Libya, and who deserve to be helped in dignity and with all the possible help we can give them. Right behind you. We're going to move down the line.
Yes, Modibo from Voice of America.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you think that the G5 countries have the tools and means to fight the trans-border crimes with the kind of mandate they have from the UN?
Sorry. Okay. What is clear is that the G5 countries are in the front lines of fighting extremism in the region. And it's not just a mandate, but it will also be the technical and financial support that the international community is able to give them. They will not be able to do it on their own, and the UN and the international community needs to support them as much as possible. Yeah, right in front of you.
Just two-part question on Myanmar. We met the Secretary General last week, and he'd said that until now, all communication with the Myanmar government had sort of fallen on deaf ears. Has he actually sort of been able to gain any traction in that conversation over the last few days? And the second thing about the humanitarian situation in Bangladesh, has the government reached out for more aid and more support, and does the UN have a plan to actually ramp up, including making any sort of clear financial allocations?
Sure. Our humanitarian colleagues are scrambling in the best possible sense of the term to try to get as much aid there as quickly as possible. I mean, the numbers that I keep reading are staggering if you stop to think about those numbers for just a second. When you talk about the number of pregnant women, the number of children under 5, I mean, they're just numbers being read out here, but when you think about each of those numbers represent an individual who has trekked through very hard conditions to get to someplace. We know that Bangladesh, with the recent floods, is also facing its own difficulties. Our humanitarian colleagues are putting a plan together, which will need substantial financial support from the international community, and is working hand in hand with the authorities in Bangladesh to try to get as much support on site, water, food, social service. I mean, We talked I think last week about World Health Organization vaccinating tens of thousands of children against polio and measles. I mean, this mass movement of people creates all sorts of challenges in public health, in education, in access to water. So we're working very closely with the authorities in Myanmar. On your first part, as I said, there's been no other phone call between the Secretary General and Aung San Suu Kyi. I think he has made his position, his message very clearly and very publicly. He told, he was speaking in an interview last week where he said he really thought the upcoming statement by Aung San Suu Kyi is almost the last chance to try to reverse the situation. Obviously, he made a call for a halt of military and security operations. It seems that I wouldn't say that call has been heeded. We will obviously listen very closely to what she has to say. Oleg?
Just a quick follow-up. Is there an estimation of how much will be required?
No, I can't. It'll be a large amount. I don't have an estimate right now. Oleg?
So, Stéphane, thanks. Can you confirm that Secretary General is going to be Lavrov after his speech addressed to the GA? And what are they going to discuss? Are they going to discuss Ukraine, Syria, what other issues? And also, while meeting President Poroshenko, what message Secretary General is going to convey to him? Is he going to try to mediate something between these two countries? Thank you.
The Secretary General will meet Foreign Minister Lavrov. I don't have the exact time and date, but I know that bilateral is scheduled to discuss. We'll be putting a readout afterwards, but I think, as you can imagine, there are a number of pressing issues to discuss with the Russian Federation, Syria, Ukraine, the situation in the Middle East in general, and many others. And as for Ukraine, I would say I would wait for the readout as well. Adam.
Yeah, just to follow up on Yemen, I know you said you weren't sure if the special envoy there had his contract extended, but I just wanted to ask it from a different angle. Are we expecting a personnel change in the next few weeks? And if not, is there concern that he's apparently still not able to speak to the Houthi rebels in that area?
No personnel change that I'm aware, and the special envoy continues to have contacts on various parties and various sides. Abdelhamid and Matthew.
Thank you. I have two questions. One on Western Sahara about the whereabouts of Mr. Kohler. In a statement attributed to the spokesman, he said that he's going to the region to visit various parts of that concerned area. So if you can tell us more about his travel schedule. And the second, there is a report that Mr. Mladinov will submit a report to the quartet and beyond, which is called the contact group. And he would be assessing the peaceful settlement and how it has been not moving forward 50 years after occupation and 24 years after
I haven't
Oslo.
heard. I'll check on the report. I have not heard. Your first question, I believe Mr. Kohler was here, and I don't have any schedule. I don't have any schedule to announce on his travel. Obviously, it's his wish to go. As soon as we have a date, we will let you know. I was handed a statement on the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which I will read out. The Secretary General condemns the killing of a Tanzanian peacekeeper serving with the UN Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo on September 17th in Mamudioma in North Kivu Province. This happened following a clash with suspected members of armed groups, the Allied Democratic Forces. Another peacekeeper was also injured during the incident. The Secretary General offers his condolences to the friends and families of the deceased and the government of the United Republic of Tanzania. He wishes a speedy recovery to the injured and urges the authorities in the Democratic Republic of the Congo to swiftly investigate the incident and bring the perpetrators to justice. The Secretary General calls on all armed groups in the DRC to cease violence and avoid further deterioration of the security situation in the country. Mr. Lee.
Sure. Thanks a lot. A follow-up on Western Sahara, then I want to ask about Burundi, Cameroon, and the media center. But on Western Sahara, I wanted to ask you this. I've heard that Mr. Kohler, when he got the post, there was obviously some delay in it being formalized, but that he was able to that he placed 2 longtime staff members of his own as a P5 and a P3 staff member. And I just wanted to know, maybe I'm wrong, is that how it works in the UN? If you're appointed as an envoy,
what has happened on this is that we're in the process of recruiting staff for his office, which have, however, not been selected yet. The selection process will take place on the basis of relevant professional experience, required educational background, only in accordance with the established secretary recruitment procedures. All positions are publicly advertised through the UN website.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about, when you said DRC, I thought you were going to speak on this, but there were 36 Burundian refugees that were killed in the DRC over the weekend, and people are pretty upset about it, and they say they can't. It seems like, one, does you or MONUSCO have any idea whether it was, as reported, Congolese government forces who killed the refugees, or was it in fact Burundian forces dressed as Congolese? And what has Mr. Kafando, if he is in fact here for the week, what's his view of this? It's a lot of people.
No, I know. I have some information for you on that from our colleagues on the ground. We'll share it with you by email.
And on Cameroon, I just wanted to ask you, I know that there was a statement about the release of some Anglophone prisoners, but there's since been, even the country's own National Commission on Human Rights was denied access to prisons. And there's a video circulating of 12 people in an underground prison, Anglophone, nonviolent secessionists, what the government calls them. But is the UN continuing to follow this, or do they feel that with the release of some Anglophone prisoners, the issue is solved?
The issue is not solved, and we'll continue to follow it.
And the final thing is, yeah, absolutely. So the media center. I just want to ask you because this is UNGA week. So it was said that there are no assigned seats. It's not true. That obviously companies come with big equipment, no problem. But I did want to ask about the appropriateness of a staff member of the French presidency taking over whole rows of the media center for the traveling press corps of France. I know it's happened in this room, and you said it was. I think you said it was
Matthew,
inappropriate.
I think as Louis XIV would not have said, the media center, ce n'est pas moi. So I'm not going to address those questions. Last question, then we'll go to Brendan.
Thank you, Thorsten Nagel from Süddeutsche Zeitung, Germany. I'd like to ask you something about Trump said this morning about the staff members and the increasing of money for the United Nations. He said, like, the budget has increased by 140% and the staff has more than doubled since 2000. And now, quote, we're not seeing the result in line with this investment. That's what Mr. Trump said. Does the Secretary General agree with this statement? And
I think
the second question is this issue about reforming United Nations the most important? Maybe Trump sees it like this. Maybe the most important issue is that what Mr. General Secretary also agrees on.
Sorry, what's the last? I didn't understand the last part of the question.
Does Mr. Secretary agrees on this issue that maybe the reform agenda is the most important?
Well, I think the reform agenda is a force multiplier, right, for the Secretary General to get the reform agenda approved and blessed by the member states is a way to ensure that the UN is more effective and is more cost effective and delivers on what we need to do, whether in peacekeeping, in development, in humanitarian aid, in all the areas that we approve. So it can be the catalyst for greater improvement. I think as I said, the Secretary General was very pleased at the meeting today, and I think he very much. We listened to President Trump and his, I think, oft remark that the UN has great potential. I think we saw it as a very positive speech. On the note of positive, I will leave you in the hands of my colleague, Mr. Varma, on behalf of the President of the General Assembly.
Good afternoon.